Our weekly cybersecurity article review in 30 minutes. In an article published by the Hacker News on June 19, 2023, Microsoft blames massive DDoS attack for Azure Outlook and OneDrive disruptions. To add value to today's conversation, we have Jonathan Fisher and Paul Robbins. So, guys, as usual, thanks for joining us in this conversation.
Good
Um,
morning, Rishay. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning to
awesome.
you all.
Sure, definitely. And I always look forward to having these conversation where we can actually contribute to seeing as much as possible where we can actually analyze, assess, look at what is happening within the cybersecurity space. And when we actually look at the trend of events, activities actually taking place in cyberspace, I mean, these incidents are actually happening on a more frequent basis. So many organizations, so many sectors, so many industries are actually being affected by these various types of attacks. I mean, we are talking about DDoS attacks, in phishing, the business email compromise, the ransomware. All of these are actually becoming very lucrative for many APT groups, and as such, organizations definitely have to take the necessary measures, put the necessary things in place, get the necessary skill set, the necessary initiatives within organizations to ensure that they are operating in a way that makes them resilient as it relates to the various things that happen within cybersecurity. So we definitely be taking a look at that particular article written, published by the Hacker News. Microsoft blames massive DDoS attack, and especially for persons who might be joining us for the first time, who might be, I mean, new to cybersecurity and you're actually building your skill set. I mean, these conversations are just about for everyone who, depending on where you are at in cybersecurity. So, just to bring you up to scratch as it relates to maybe DDoS attack, you might be hearing this for the first time, but this actually stands for distributed denial of service, and is a cyber attack in which multiple compromised computer systems are used to flood a target system with excessive traffic, causing a denial of service. And DDoS attacks are typically carried out by cyber criminals to disrupt or disable websites, online services, on other networks. In the case where we're seeing coming out of this particular article that was actually experienced by Microsoft as it relates to those services. And there are two main types of DDoS attacks. You have the volumetric DDoS attacks, and you also have application layer DDoS attacks. So these can be very complicated from a technical perspective. That is, when you really go into how it is that these attacks actually operate. And at times, depending on the configuration within these environments, it can be very challenging for organizations. So can you imagine you have very large organizations who have the necessary skill, the necessary resources in place, who are being affected by these types of attacks. So can you imagine those small entities, the impact that this would have on those organizations? So I mean, that's that for the tech stuff. We can actually go and get very technical. I mean, it's a very fun area to talk about. I mean, from a technical perspective, that is. However, I mean, looking at this article, guys, then these services, based on what I'm seeing, the Outlook, the Azure, the OneDrive, these are highly relied on by many people. I mean, companies, organizations. We all use these services from time to time, and this suggests that the impact of this incident would have been quite significant. And secondly, is that this also extends to the fact that when businesses are considering moving all your infrastructure to the cloud, there are a number of risk factors that one need to consider. So these are some of the things that we want you to bear in mind as we look into this article in terms of having this conversation. But before we actually focus on those risk points, let us look at the attack itself that is presented in the article. So, Paul, would you like to start? I mean, giving your feedback on the article itself?
Yeah, one of the things that I picked out on the article, and it's great, Riche, that you acknowledge maybe some people that are new to cybersecurity and gave a very eloquent background of what DDoS is, and what it does to an organization if it's exposed. But for those that are seasoned in the industry and those that have been in the space for a while, it's very concerning that DDoS attacks are still having the impact that they're having in on organizations. So I've been in this industry almost close to 15 years now, and DDoS was a thing back then. So you figure with all the advancements that we've made in the industry, that we could do something to solve a DDoS problem, that we would have good tools, good protocol, good solutions for DDoS, but yet it's still out there and it's still prevalent. And for them to impact Azure, Outlook, and OneDrive is a very massive piece, because again, you talked about the reliability of cloud services for all sizes of organizations. It's very concerning. You're seeing this. You're seeing cross-site scripting, which is another old protocol for disruption that's still out there. So to me, it really comes down to how do we get good at taking care of the things that have been out there forever. We chase ransomware, we chase malware, we chase insider threats, which we need to. But how do we focus in on the things that have always been around for a while? How do we mitigate those things? So that was my initial thing.
Yeah, exactly. Jonathan, what's your take on this article?
I definitely like how Paul described it, that this is an attack that's been around for a long time. It's something that we shouldn't be chasing. I mean, it's heavily relied on compromised computers from prior. So, being someone that I love focusing on the human factor, right? The best way forward is to help educate people. Hey, don't click on those links. Review what you're about to click. Don't just blindly accept everything on the internet, right? Outside of that, there's not much that I as an individual can do. I mean, I can try to convert and keep my my system at home safe, my system at work safe, so that way it doesn't become one of these zombie robots, zombie machines that we like to call the machines that are part of the DDoS attacks. But this is an old type of attack, but it's still out there. It's still prevalent. So it's we just have to continue to educate, try to find those compromised systems, clean them up, get rid of them. I mean, hopefully, we can try to move some of these old systems out of the internet and the connections, so that way we can try to at least take it down. But the thing is that there's so many people who are uneducated on probably some of the cybersecurity best practices, that there's always going to be these exploits of computers that's going to bring it on. But it is interesting that it's going after Microsoft on Azure, OneDrive, Outlook. As both of you have said, this is tools that everyone uses. So it's not just focusing on one small company, one big company, but we're talking about a whole infrastructure that you take that out, and you pretty much take out millions of companies and their access to their data. And so, if you're a business owner that is moving into that, which I know we'll probably talk about later, start thinking about how much sense does it make, how much data to put on in the cloud, into these services, compared to what type of capabilities do you have to keep some stuff on premise, so that way when a huge attack like this happens, that you can still be up and running, even if it's on a limited capacity.
Sure, that's a very important point. And this also brings to the forefront a very important thing, is the fact that, so oftentimes we hear about, as it relates to cyber attacks, oftentimes many organizations, they might be focusing on ransomware or on phishing. Those are possibly a business email compromise. Those might be the top ones that persons are normally focused on, not recognizing that you have a vast amount of ways in which attacks can actually take place against an organization. So if you are not really focused or strategic as an organization, then you can find yourself actually planning for ransomware, business email compromise, not recognizing that you have internet-facing application, websites, various services that are actually running. And once there is a DDoS attack on your organization, that can significantly interfere with your entire operation. And one of the things coming out of the article is that while there is no evidence that any customer data was accessed or compromised, the company noted the attacks temporarily impacted availability. So we recognize that you have data at risk, you have the the services going offline. So at times persons might see that okay, there's a data breach, and that is where many persons focuses on in terms of persons' information being exposed. But we are talking about that unavailability, which goes back to the CIA of data, the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of data coming into play. So when we talk about security, then all of these elements need to be accounted for in terms of your planning, your strategies, your whatever initiatives, whatever controls that are being implemented within the organization should always factor in the confidentiality, the integrity, the availability of data within these organizations. And very importantly, I recognize that since the start of COVID, and even during that period, 2020 coming down to 2023, many companies, a lot of organizations were actually forced into remote work, online connectivity, moving outside of the office, the regular office, to remote working, to moving a lot of their operations into the cloud. And as a result of actually taking your organization into the cloud without actually evaluating the necessary risk, I mean, a lot of businesses never had the time to really plan to think about risk. It was all about operation, continuity. How can we continue? How can we survive? How can we operate, irrespective of what was happening within the pandemic? And that, in of itself, actually opened a door, an entire attack surface to so many things that we're actually seeing happening now. So, guys, what are your thoughts in terms of giving your perspective on what are some of those risks that are actually associated with moving to the cloud environment based on what you have actually, I mean, gained from this article?
I actually think one of the biggest risks is businesses don't even know what the cloud is. That is something that we have struggled with in the industry of defining what cloud is. There's a funny T-shirt or a cartoon that I've seen out there is a little kid is asking their grandfather, what's a cloud, and it's and the grandfather says, oh, it's just computers that are just out there, and that's what it is. And businesses really need to identify what the cloud is and what it means to them. Some of the risks, because I was in security March 2020, and you're absolutely right, Rashay. What people were doing, what it wasn't about security or risk, it was how do we survive? How does the business survive today? Like if we're not producing, if we're not servicing customers for a week, we can go out of business. So there wasn't any thought around anything that would impede that. But to your point, a lot of companies didn't take the step back and say, okay, we're doing business, we're fine. Now how do we wrap risk management, cybersecurity around where it is that we're going? And that's you're synopsis of we've introduced a new attack surface is absolutely true. 100% true. I do want to go back a little bit to when you're talking about the impact of a DDoS scenario and how a lot of people, if there's an incident that takes place, will kind of wear a red badge of courage on their shirt saying, well, you know, company data wasn't compromised or company data wasn't exfiltrated. And the analogy that I'll use is if my house were to burn down to the ground and no one in my family was killed, thank God no one in my house was killed, no one in my house was harmed, but we still have a big problem on our hand. We're homeless at this point. We've lost, you know, we've lost time, we've lost important things for our lives. Our lives have now been upended for weeks, months, years potentially because of this thing that's happened to my home. So, you know, okay, great, you haven't lost the data or the data hasn't been exfiltrated or whatever, but especially in a DDoS attack, you're not doing business. You know, to simplify DDoS even more, your technology stack has been rendered useless because of this attack. You can't use it because it's been flooded with God knows what, and you cannot work. So there is still damages that have taken place. There is still business disruptions that have taken place. And while it's not as catastrophic as data exfiltration, maybe it is, but you're still at a loss. So it's not, you know, an attack is an attack is an attack is an attack. Whether it's data exfiltration, cross-site scripting, DDoS, it's still something that's business disrupting that has to be fixed. And the CIA triad is a tried and true method. You know, how are we keeping things confidential? How are we keeping the integrity of things? But also it's the availability. It all go. There's not one more important thing. They're all 33.3% important to an organization for survival.
Yeah, that's a very important point there, Paul. So we recognize that this DDoS attack on Microsoft, I think there is a really very vital or important lesson from within this in of itself, to recognize that, I mean, regardless of your organization, no company, no business is actually immune to these various type of attacks that can actually affect your operation. So this is something that one has to plan for and seriously think about and understand. And the thing is that even if you do not have the capabilities, possibly a security team, sometimes it's a one-man operation. I mean, you are the CEO, you are the finance, all of these things. So at times it's very difficult, but at least you can actually outsource. I mean, connect with someone, get the services of some securities services that can actually provide you with a level of guidance and possibly put the necessary measures in place to ensure that you are resilient in light of all of these various attacks that can actually affect your operation. Um, it goes on to say that I'm trying to see. Okay, it says that within the article that Killnet has also attracted attention for its DDoS attack on healthcare entities hosted in Microsoft Azure, which have surged from 10 to 20 attacks in 2022 to 40 to from 40 to 60 attacks daily in February 2023. So this is definitely telling us that we have to, our companies need to actually start planning for these events that can actually affect an organization. Now, Jonathan, can you maybe share some light in terms of the risk that persons need to consider as it relates to um, moving into the cloud?
Yeah, I think the thing I love about the cloud is it's been able to make it possible for, as you said, these one or two person operations to develop, to grow, you know, because they don't have to worry too much about the security or how to, you know, develop a website, they can outsource that to Microsoft, to AWS, to Google Cloud, to be able to do stuff like that, and that way they can just focus on their business. But at the same time, just as those companies, those individuals are trying to learn about, hey, how do I take care of finances? How do I develop operations? How do I, develop my marketing skills? They're having to learn these. Take time to learn what the skills that you need to know for the cloud. The basic skills, like what is your responsibility? So many people I've talked to who kind of are working in that small business startup type of environment, they often think, oh, I have it in the cloud, I'm good, it's secured. Well, the great thing is that within the cloud, there's something called the shared responsibility model, where the cloud hosting companies, AWS, Azure, they do certain things. They secure the cloud, but you'll have to secure your own data within that cloud, right? So the data that you're putting in, don't just put it in there and think it's good, it's secure. You could still do different type of security measures that you can put in there, right? Make sure that you have encryption at rest. Make sure that you're enabling encryption in transit. Use the keys and the tools that those companies offer at a price. So those business owners have to understand that there is still going to be some additional costs besides just the uptime that you have, right? For additional services, there's going to be a little bit of cost, but is it going to be worth it in the end? Well, to ensure that you're protected, yes, absolutely. If companies are concerned about attacks against themselves, when it comes to this article, it's going against Azure. There's not much that you can do about a DDoS against Azure, right? That's the higher level hierarchy in the cloud infrastructure. That's something you can't really focus. But for a company that's just starting out, best thing to do is look at what type of disaster recovery services can you provide, right? Can you separate it, get into different availability zones, get into different regions, right? If there's an outage in your area, whether it's a DDoS or just a power outage, right? Some city worker cut the wrong line, or I saw a picture yesterday of an infrastructure fire in a sewer from some electrical lines in New York City, and someone talking about that's an occurrence. Fiber doesn't catch on fire, but a lot of the fiber lines, a lot of our internet lines are running right next to these electrical lines, right? So something simple like that can take out it in that availability zone. So make sure that you're spreading it across the different areas, different regions. If you're looking to grow, look into different countries also, but be aware of the different regulations that you have to follow within those countries. That's probably one of the biggest keys is for business owners to educate themselves, as Paul had mentioned earlier, and just to develop those practices and learn more about what the cloud is. It's nothing that you can just throw out there in space. It is going into a computer somewhere. It's not just up there floating in the sky somewhere that it's just magically comes down to our computers when we want it to. It's physically connected to a computer somewhere else that we connect to it through our internet connection. So, understanding that we are still connected to everything, and to be aware of that.
Yeah, and to support Jonathan's statement about the data the shared responsibility model, businesses aren't even reading the end user license agreement or the EULA with that. So I've seen a lot of companies that have gotten hit and they're like, well, I can sue Amazon or I can sue Microsoft because they're supposed to be responsible for the data. And it's black and white. It's right there. They relieve themselves of all responsibility of your data. You own the data. You own that data. And it's kind of like a barbershop or a salon, a beauty salon. They provide you the space for you to do your work, but it's your responsibility to bring in clients. It's your responsibility to have the right tools to service your clients. If you don't have it, and you're not making any money, you're paying for that seat at the barber shop or the salon. That's not their responsibility to do it. It's the same thing. And I think a lot of companies get tripped up on, which Jonathan, which you said is, well, this just goes into the ether, and nobody's gonna mess with it. Angels want nothing to do with it or whatever. It's just in the cloud. It's in the cloud. But it's a computer. It's a computer. Like you absolutely are right. And to have these conversations and to educate people on this is so key, because this is a lot of stuff that people are missing. They're just missing it. And yeah, no, Jonathan, that was great. That was really great talk on that.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, that technical perspective to this conversation. Definitely, but those are very vital points as it relates to actually moving into the code. And as you have actually said, Paul, that fine print, that understanding the shared responsibility model, right? So, and at times, what I think what happens with a lot of businesses when they actually move to the cloud or to employ cloud services, they really do not understand all these fine prints, the technicalities. It's a matter of um, is my server working or is my website up and running? Um, all I need to know is that we are functioning, but what actually goes on behind the scene? They really do not understand the extent of their responsibility versus the responsibility of the code. So those are very important things that businesses organization, and I think that also for us as security professionals, possibly there you might also find I'm actually experiencing this in terms of going back to integrity of the service providers at times, especially when you have the, for example, the sales engineers or persons who actually onboard or introduce these services. At times, they do not really spend that time. They focus on the sales, but not really the safeguarding and ensuring that the client, the end users, the customer is actually aware of all the various scenarios or the risk involved. So this at times also leads to organization, I mean, falling victim or becoming vulnerable to these various type of incidents that can actually affect these organizations. So it's very important that we as security professionals, I mean, maintain that level of integrity in terms of our interaction, I mean, with various entities, organizations, in terms of what it is that we do in delivering services to these various organizations. Um, just to add to this is the fact that when you think about going to the cloud or moving to the cloud, then you have to think about the connectivity. I mean, network dependencies, you're talking about your data security and privacy, cost management, your compliance regulation, data transfer, bandwidth costs, those dependency, there's SLAs. You're talking about performance and latency, operational complexities, um, application compatibility and migration challenges, loss of control and transparency, complexity of code architecture. So all of these, and there are many more things that organizations or you as a business will have to think about, and your team will definitely need to ensure that they are actually advising the powers that be within this organization of all of these things that can actually or must be taken into consideration as it relates to their consistent operation. Um, so, guys, any final words on the article in terms of lessons learned and how it is uh, organizations can actually prepare themselves in light of this scenario? Any final words?
Resiliency, resiliency, resiliency. Never, you know, if you're saying to yourself, well, we're 100% protected, we don't have any risk, you're in grave danger, because as this attack has shown, you could have all the security controls that you want in the world, covering your infrastructure, the best policies and procedures. But if you're reliant on Microsoft services to run your business and they go down, that you can't control Microsoft's security. So it's always thinking of the worst case scenario and how do you conduct business outside of it. The only way to do that is through a plan of resiliency.
Yep, right on point. Any
Yep.
final words from you, Jonathan?
Yeah, just to echo what Paul said, just look at your business model, what makes sense to make sure that, something that could happen, whether, a man-made attack or a natural event that could bring your system down. How can you bring it back up? What are tools and plans that you have in place to get those systems back online and running, and just be aware of the additional costs and the return on investment that you can have by using cloud services. Again, it's great, as we mentioned earlier, the ability to, hey, here I am in the eastern United States. Well, I'm going to throw something over on the western side. What's the likelihood that there's going to be a critical effect that happens on both sides outside of a major DDoS attack, like in this article? But again, I've seen, I know like AWS also had an attack, a year or two ago, and it didn't take down the whole system, maybe just a big chunk, which happened to be the default area where most people just click, yep, I want to be in, Ohio 1 or Central or Eastern United States 1. Look at moving that to different areas, to different locations, regions, because if just that section goes down, you're still up and running. So just look at how you can spread out that business to put redundancy within the systems and in the regions, to make sure, again, that you're resilient and you can bounce back quickly.
Great point. Definitely very valid point, guys. I mean, it's always a pleasure having you in terms of sharing in these conversations. And guys, there you have it. Your our cybersecurity article review in 30 minutes. So see you next week, same time, same place, where we look forward to having further awesome conversation. So guys, have a wonderful day.
All right. Have a good day and a great week.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.